Good evening. It is, we'll just, I'll do some preliminary because I just saw 6:58. Today is June 6th. It is the 80th anniversary of D-Day. Maybe we just take a few seconds, not for a long moment of silence, but just to be aware of a whole bunch of people who sacrificed a whole bunch for freedom a long time ago on beaches, not knowing whether they would live to see the next day. So just a few quick seconds. Thank you. It won't be too heavy. If you have been to those beaches, you will never forget it. If you have not, I hope that you get a chance or just think about that. That I think gets us to 7 o'clock. And so we'll get started. Welcome to our June 6, 2024 meeting. I'm Matthew Franti, Chair of the Northern Virginia Transportation Commission. I'd like to note that we are starting the meeting at 7:01. We are live streaming the meeting on NVTC's YouTube channel. Our board administrator has already confirmed we have an in-person quorum. And it is still true that I have a wonderful daughter that I'm hoping to get home to. We will have full discussion. We have some staff presentations. There's one change to the agenda. We have removed agenda item 4, resolution of commendation for Mary Hines. Ms. Hines is a little under the weather, so she's let us know she is unable to attend tonight. We will honor her at a future commission meeting for sure. So many of us know her and know her extraordinary service. We have a full agenda. I'm proposing we do block votes for our commuter choice and VRE action items. Are there any objections to doing so? Hearing none, let's get started. Oath of office. First, Delegate Reed couldn't attend last month's meeting, so I'd like to welcome him back to NVTC. Delegate Reed, can you join me up front for your ceremonial oath of office? Remember last month, I got a coded, we will do another handshake, but I've got a coded oath here so I get it right. Raise your right hand. Okay. I do solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States.
I do solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States
And the Commonwealth of Virginia.
and the Commonwealth of Virginia,
And that I will faithfully discharge all of the duties incumbent upon me
and I will faithfully discharge all the duties incumbent upon me
as a member of the Northern Virginia Transportation Commission,
as a member of the Northern Virginia Transportation Commission.
according to the best.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much. And you, as you go back to your seat, you just want to share a couple of sentences or a few quick thoughts on being back. Welcome to. You do not have to filibuster. We're not requiring that. But any thoughts that you wanted to share, Delegate Reed?
So I'm going to take my cue from the chairman who said he has a daughter that he wants to get home to, and it's great to be back and being able to once again address the issues of mass transit here in Northern Virginia. So thank you all for having me back.
Great. Welcome. Thank you. Glad you're here with us and back. Thank you, Delegate Reed. Commissioner Reed. So now we will move right on. As we do each month, NVTC continues to seek general public comments. Kate, did we get any public comment for this month?
Yes, indeed, Mr. Chair. We did receive one public comment for this meeting from an Amtrak user for the Vinchester facility. The chair concerns about more VREs trains on that route and how it may affect the Amtrak trains that this individual uses. The comment was shared earlier today with all of you. Yeah, I did pass along the VRE.
Wonderful. Thank you. Action item 2 is approval of the minutes of the May 2nd, 2024 meeting. Can I have a motion to approve the minutes of that meeting?
So moved.
Second. Thank you. Moved by Commissioner Darby, Chair Darby, if you permit me, and seconded, I think, by Commissioner Alcorn. Any further discussion of the minutes? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No opposed, 2 okay, so we have abstentions from Commissioner Aguirre, Commissioner Palchik, and Commissioner Letourneau. No opposed. Motion passes and our minutes are approved. Item 3 is approval of the consent agenda. We have 2 items. 3A, authorize the executive director to send a letter certifying receipt of certain documents from WMATA required by state code. Action 3B, adopt the NBTC electronic participation policy. Our executive director will highlight key points for the electronic participation policy as we prepare for virtual meetings of the summer. As such, I do encourage you all to read it through and become familiar with that policy. Can I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Just don't move.
I think that we'll go with moved by Senator Evan and seconded by Commissioner Antonis. Any further discussion of the consent agenda? Hearing none, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions on the consent agenda? No. The motion passes. Our consent agenda has been approved. That's items 3A and 3B are approved. Skipping over number 4, as I mentioned earlier, and we are now item 5. Report. We have our board members here tonight to give their report. And we'll turn it over to Paul and Matt to provide their report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The WMATA board met last on May 9th. Everyone has hopefully seen by now that Metro is conducting its third and final phase of public outreach for the Better Bus network redesign. Feedback collected between May and the end of July will help inform a finalized 2025 first year network, which is slated to roll out. In your materials, you'll be able to find some information on the proposed network in Virginia. As part of the Better Bus implementation, we are looking to update the Metro Bus subsidy allocation formula this fall as well. NBTC has spent time this past fall and winter discussing some of the current issues with the existing formula, namely the fact that service provided is not directly tied to funding provided, subsidy provided. The board will also be working closely with staff and regional partners to update the Metro Rail subsidy allocation formula. So please stay tuned for more information on that this summer. And the last bullet for me, Metro is also working on an update to its fleet management plan. Metro staff has briefed the board in June on several options regarding the purchase of 8,000 series rail cars and future rail service planning considerations to help the region understand the potential needs for it. I'll turn it over to my colleague.
Thanks. So a couple things, just real quick, you may have seen today from Metro that we received an American Public Transit Association APTA Gold Safety Award for category of heavy rail systems, and that is for our Just Culture program and our Station Overrun program. So I think that's a good indication of the progress that we've made. The Just Culture concept has been a priority for our Chief Safety Officer, Teresa Pestato, and the whole team there to encourage employees to speak up, to create an environment in which you can have corrections to actions that are not punitive while also setting standards. So just wanted to note that. I'm going to talk for a minute about the fiscal reserve issue or lack thereof at Metro. So one of my priorities as a finance and capital chair before my time is through is to implement a fiscal reserve for Metro. We currently don't have one. It is highly unusual in the world of transit, as it is in the world of government, which most of us come from, to not have any kind of reserve policy. So essentially what that means is every cent that we have, we spend, and of course we're very reliant on subsidy. I think that historically we've been in this position because the attitude has kind of been that all the jurisdictions are the reserve fund, but that kind of puts Metro in a annual stance of having to have our hand out all the time in a way that also kind of disincentivizes our staff to be doing the things that we want them to do. So what we've seen over the past year from Randy Clark and from the team, and you heard about it when Randy was here, is a really concerted effort on efficiency within the organization. everything from our telephone call centers, which have been consolidated, to a fleet consolidation of our vehicle fleets, to numerous other changes that have resulted in savings of over $100 million on our budget. We can only do so much of that annually. At some point you become as efficient as you can. So what we'd like to do is create a policy and then a strategy to work toward the policy, in which a certain amount of our budget is held in reserve if we're running to the positive. So, in this particular fiscal year, we've already passed the FY25 budget. The goal would be, if we are running a surplus during the course of the year, that money would then stay with Metro, but it would be put in a reserve fund for future needs and to help smooth over potential shortfalls that we have. Now, I fully recognize, a budget as large as ours, a typical fiscal reserve for most of our counties or our cities is probably about 10%. I know in Loudoun County, we have a 10% fiscal reserve. Getting to that number would be a big deal and require a lot of money. But we can certainly start as a matter of policy at getting there. And we do some of this kind of management. For instance, we're sitting on a large amount of unused Metro fares that have been purchased but not utilized by the customer. One of the things that I'm having conversations with staff about is how to address the really old ones, because they're sort of sitting out there in a way as a liability, money that we can't really assume, but we actually have. So we already kind of manage that, or staff does, on a monthly basis. So I'm not talking so much about the monthly flow, but rather, what are the guidelines and the criteria needed to access this funding? Obviously, you start with the assumption that it would require a board action, that there would be certain categories. We have some fiscal policies, but we don't have a strong fiscal plan that I'm used to, and that all of you are probably used to, that you adhere to help make your decisions. So the board has had some preliminary discussions about this. Our chief financial officer has been working on proposals. I'm expecting this month to spend a lot of time myself on sort of coming up with a proposal to take to the board, and certainly we'll want to get input from all the jurisdictions on this. But I just wanted to kind of introduce the topic to you. Now, one question has been, why would you do this now, given the financial difficulty? But I actually think it's the right time to do this, because we want to sort of establish, as we move forward with what is a long-term need. We've kind of handled the Band-Aid for the next couple of years. Obviously, we're still going to need some action next year, but we've gotten, we've kept the organization running for now. But this is part of what we should be planning for as we think about what the long-term need is for the organization, is to kind of have this sort of more self-sustenance in this, which I think, again, will kind of create an incentive for staff to manage effectively. Not that they need it, given our situation, but a good culture around that then allows us to try to have a reserve, so that should we hit, God forbid, another sort of situation that we have a little bit more ability to operate without having to drastically cut service or make, drastic changes, which really do affect the public in major ways. And I think we kind of, it's one thing on paper, but when we're constantly having to announce the type of service cuts and things like that we've had to do several times over the last several years, fortunately, for the most part, they haven't had to happen, but even that creates such a sort of reaction for our customers who are reliant on Metro. So if we can do something to kind of help in the future, give us more ability to manage that and smooth out those sort of issues, it would be to our benefit. So just wanted to kind of update everybody that that's, I think, a major initiative for the board this summer, and stay tuned.
Thank you.
And go ahead, Chair, if I could, just for the new members, in case you're not familiar, Metro Board consists of 8 people, 2 representatives from the federal government, 2 from Maryland, 2 from the district, and 2 from Virginia. Matt and I obviously serve in the Virginia roles. Walter Elkhorn and Nick Ruggieri are our alternates. Matt serves as chairman of the Finance Committee, and I currently serve as chairman.
Thank you, Chair Smedberg, and Finance Committee Chair Letourneau. I just say that because your service has been a ton of work, and also quality work, and really great to hear about the your effort to get this debt, this reserve, in as part of your priorities over the coming. So questions, Commissioner Walker, first Commissioner Briskman, and then Commissioner.
Thank you. I appreciate the idea of building more confidence in Metro, so we don't have these sorts of announcements that kind of shake the confidence of the users and may prevent some folks from thinking about depending on Metro. But my question, I have actually two questions. One was last time Metro had a surplus. And then what is the policy now? Like, is the policy now that it reverts back to the jurisdiction?
Policy that there really isn't a policy,
Oh.
which is itself a bit of an issue. I would say we managed to a surplus because you have to, you can't manage to a deficit. Otherwise, we're coming with needs. We can generally forecast when we're going to be short, and that's why we've had these kind of conversations we've had. Obviously, when the federal relief stops, we knew we were going to have a problem on a monthly basis. We can pretty much target when that would happen. But so we do have a surplus, so to speak. But it's usually because we've managed to that surplus throughout the year, knowing that there is nothing else to pull from. And there are implications at times for service on that. We've had to make some service adjustments and some spending adjustments, and we've had to slow some capital projects and things like that at different points in order to keep us on track.
Commissioner Walker.
Commissioner Briskman started down the track that I was going to go down, but first, just from a governance perspective, to me, it absolutely makes sense to establish the policy and the reserve. It does seem to me that absent dedicated funding for revenue, it is a little bit circular in that we will be paying it at the end of the day. Anyway, so if you have $10 million, if you manage to a $10 million surplus at the end of the fiscal year, previously you would presumably roll that over and apply it to your operating costs for the next fiscal year. If instead you took that $10 million and we're going to put it in the managed reserve piggy bank, that's $10 million that the jurisdiction will be funding. Not to say it's a reason not to do it to get the process started, but at the end of the day, we're funding it until or unless there's some dedicated revenue.
Yeah, no, you're right. And that's why we want to obviously have a very transparent conversation with everybody about this. But it is ultimately coming from subsidy mostly, obviously mixed with revenue. But how it's accessed and when it's accessed and how quickly we can kind of move on it as opposed to going and saying, hey, all right, we need more money from you now because of some problem is kind of the difference.
And Jim, I think also part of the policy would be how the money gets in,
right?
Or what type. So.
Great. Other questions? Commissioner Carantonis?
Sure, Mr. Chair, thank you. So that's very interesting because I understand that you are installing the system as you go. So how does this compare with other metropolitan transportation agencies? I understand that their source of money is different, but I'm sure there are best practices. Do they have one fund for that, or is it organized by users, etc.? And to what degree are you planning to come back and explain the policy of when this kicks in? What is the rainy day, let's say?
Absolutely. So that has to be really clearly defined.
Yeah. My concern is that I don't want to be in a place where somebody will tell you, well, I recognize that you have this urgent need, but you have a rainy day fund. Why don't you deplete that first? So that will become counterproductive. So we need to have an agreement on that.
Yeah, I think the first question is the ones that I've seen generally, there's one standard reserve that can be drawn from other transit agencies. Staff has put together some research on this, and we seem to be unique in not having any kind of component like this, at least in policy. So that's one of the things that's prompting us. Another thing that's prompting us, I should mention, and I didn't, is From a capital standpoint, I do believe there could be a benefit to our credit by doing this. Certainly, you know, strict adherence to fiscal policy is one of the criteria by which you're judged. I'm also the Loudon Finance Committee Chairman, and that's Supervisor Brisbane serves on the committee, and where we do that in our jurisdictions all the time, and we're generally rewarded for that, with high bond ratings. Metro's credit ratings are not abnormal for the type of agency it is, but there are several grades below what our jurisdictions are. We lack taxing authority, so that's sort of an automatic. But I think there's room for improvement there, and I think a fiscal policy would help us because it is something that's come up in those discussions.
The last time we were at the bond house, yeah, we had a series of meetings, year and a half.
A year ago.
And it was every single house asked us, the rating agency asked us about.
Right.
Yeah, it's enough.
Yeah, every.
But in terms of, you're right, the policy has to be very clearly, this isn't intended for staff just to be able to use money whenever it needs to. It's going to require board action, and then there's going to be a set of criteria that would have to be in place for us to be able to act as it.
Great, and it sounds like maybe you can add staff, or you already know the comparable agencies, what they have is their fund. Great, Commissioner Falco.
Yeah, small comment in your opinion that it absolutely makes sense. Not 100% apples to apples, but thinking of those who serve on school boards, which also do not have funding authority, we created reserves over the years in order to be able to have those buffers, and also to be just very transparent about what is being done and how those reserves, whether they become one use or long term, there's some comparability to message. But yeah, excellent.
But I can assure you, when staff first raised this, Matt and I were on a call, and we insisted that there be consideration of a really strict policy as it relates.
Yeah, we had some discussion of this during the final stages of adoption of the FY25 budget, and whether it should be budget language in that budget that would allow us to flow surplus in there. And what we did instead was just sort of put language in stating that the board will create and address a fiscal policy, because there's a lot of questions about this, and we want to go through a vetting process. To your question, I mean, I do anticipate, this will be a publicly available policy before it's adopted, and we'll be sharing it with all the jurisdictional staff.
Great, good point. Certainly the difference between one time and ongoing is very important, and the process that you're going through sounds good. I do not see, but totally open. Yes, Commissioner Reed.
Yeah, thanks very much. So Matt and Paul, I just have a couple questions. When you're talking about jurisdictions, you're not just talking about the folks in here, you're talking about Maryland and DC and the federal government as well, right?
Yeah, well, I can't speak to the federal government, but yes.
And then is that, when we're talking about comparing apples to apples, are we unique in the fact that we have multiple jurisdictions? So therefore, it's like when you're comparing to other similar type of metros that have a reserve fund, does that become part of the problem?
I mean, not completely unique, because other transit agencies do have multi-jurisdictional. We're probably the largest, and we're the only one with 3. There are some that serve, greater Kansas City area, even in the New York area, Port Authority serves New York, New Jersey. There's different, components of that. We're unique in that we have 3. Yes.
And I guess the last question that I have is, because of the way that we do it here in Virginia, is this going to require legislation from the General Assembly, or?
We don't think so, no. We think it's a internal fiscal policy for the organization.
Yeah. Vice Chair Snyder.
There was a mention about subsidy allocation. Can you tell us a little bit more about that, how that's going to be discussed?
So we're essentially reviewing all of our allocation formulas. The Better Bus redesign is kind of a natural place to take a look at the bus side. But it's been very clear from some of our colleagues that if we're going to look at bus, they want to look at rail as well. So just being completely candid, I think there's a general thought that among some, not necessarily 2 of us, that Virginia may be overpaying some on bus, given the level of service, but maybe underpaying on rail, given the amount of service that we have and track stations and so on. There's a bunch of different ways that you can kind of look at this. Whether there will be consensus from all the jurisdictions on how we would change the formula, but it is a board policy. It is something that we can change, which I think is a little bit of there's some confusion on that. It is not a compact formula. It's not, the compact doesn't have to be changed to change the funding formula. One thing that I have raised is for discussion, and I actually think we'll turn it over to Andrew for maybe if you want to give any update on what the staff discussions have been on this. But one thing I have raised is it could be possible in this that right now the Virginia subsidy is broken down by Metro according to this formula. One option in this discussion is that Metro deals with the subsidy allocation between Maryland, DC, and Virginia, and then leaves it to MVTC to break down the subsidy within Virginia. Which, the way that our money kind of flows in and out, we're all coming through MVTC on our Metro money anyway. So that could potentially leave this in the hands of this body instead of the Metro board for that type of discussion. I'm just raising this as an idea. I've raised it, others have raised it, that we should be looking at in this, and there's probably pros and cons to that. But the overall amount, Virginia, because really for Metro, what we're looking at is, okay, how much are we getting from Virginia? And I can tell you kind of on the staff basis and so on, there's a lot less emphasis on how much each individual jurisdiction in Virginia is paying, because at the end of the day, it's a Virginia number and it's coming. And that's what our budget's based on, so, anything you want to add?
Jeff, that, we're focused on supporting our jurisdictions and staff and you all, and getting, as smart as we can on this, but there's also, ripple effect of policies and how funding works within NVTC and Vermont, and we're just trying to stay tuned to how all of those things interact.
Yeah, I mean, clearly certain people, like the chairman of the DC Council, has a very specific agenda entering into this discussion, which is to lower the district's subsidy and increase ours.
That's simple. He says it 10 times a meeting.
Yeah, I'm not talking to you guys back. I mean, he's very, very clear. So I think we've got to look, but we have to look at it in totality. I mean, when you look at bus, it's kind of fundamentally different. We have these regional routes today, and I think that's the root of what causes a lot of confusion in our formula, because they're like split between jurisdictions and their shared costs and so on. You could go to a much simpler, cleaner bus formula, which is effectively that you're paying for the service that's in your jurisdiction. And then on rail, how do you do that? The mayor has proposed a third. We've looked at that possibility, but there may be other ways to look at that. So.
My only question is, how does this move forward, proceed, that is?
I'd say ultimately decision of the Metro board. Now, again, I don't think it's one that would be made in the vacuum by any means. I think it starts, there's Metro staff level analysis that has been conducted and is continuing to be conducted. It will be presented to the board relatively soon. And then it's really, I think, up to the board in terms of how we want to move forward with it and act on it. I suspect one of the first pieces of that will be, once we've seen enough of this analysis, is to go back and share it with all the jurisdictions that we represent and begin to have discussions with all of you about where we might want to go with this, and the other jurisdictions will do the same thing. And then we'll probably come back and ask the question of whether, the 8 of us can come up with something that has enough buy-in from the whole region as a fair set of changes to the board.
I guess my interest is making sure that MVTC is involved and this comes back to us before their final decisions made at the Metro board. Is that a reasonable request?
Yeah, I think Andrew has been and Alan have been extremely involved in the staff level discussions that Metro have had, and probably know more about the specifics of what they may propose than I do at the moment. So I think it certainly will continue to be a topic for this group.
Great, Commissioner Alcorn.
Yeah, this is perhaps something we could put on the agenda for the right. Thanks.
Great, and your comment, thank you, Vice Chair Snyder, for the questions. They're important, and your comments, Matt, sort of could have prompted 9 other hands, but because if we're going to be debating it at MBTC, that certainly puts some interest into our meetings in a new additional way. But I think we basically covered the topics and really appreciate, I don't know, if either of you have anything to add to close, we'll go to WMATA committee, but go ahead.
I just have 2 quick things. See, Matt's committee gets all the fun stuff, and I just get yelled at all day by elected officials. And no, not you. And our new inspector general starts actually on Sunday. It's a weird thing with the WMATA and HR system, but so Monday will be her first day in the office. So we just wanted to let you know.
Great. Thank you both, and for the updates and the thoughts. I will say, minor, perhaps in some ways minor, but on May 9th, the 2000 series transition, and that just felt like an additional tiny jolt of energy in my day. The progress in lots of small but very important ways that add up to big. The progress continues, and so appreciate that. We'll go to we had a joint meeting and report from the chairs of the WMATA committee as well as the Legislative and Policy Committee. Legislative and Policy Committee Chair Commissioner Aguirre and Commissioner Alcorn will lead us through the agenda item. We'll start with Chair Aguirre.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So as you mentioned, the WMATA Committee and Legislative Policy Committee met for a joint meeting on May 16th, where we received an update from Ms. Perone-Seibert on what happened at the special session on May 13th, and we got a budget passed, which was great. A couple things in particular: the budget temporarily suspends for the next 2 fiscal years a 3% cap that limits the growth and operating assistance that the Virginia localities provide to WMATA. So that was an important piece of legislation that went through. Also, the budget includes $60.2 million in FY 2025 and $84.5 million in FY 26 for additional state aid to support MVTC jurisdictions with the WMATA payments, as well as requires WMATA to benchmark operating costs against other large transit providers. And I believe we have Ms. Perone-Seibert with us virtually, and I'll throw it over to her for some additional updates.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me here. I don't have too much to add to that update. Obviously, we were very excited that the special session happened. Surprisingly, I can't believe that was less than a month ago. However, we got the budget passed with all the help from everybody here in this room and especially all the legislators. So thank you for everybody's assistance on that. The other thing that I think is happened in the interim is SJ 28, Senator Evans' resolution dealing with the study to look at transit funding and particularly metro funding. We finally have all the appointments for that, and I'll run through them just for everybody to have them. The Senate appointments were Mr. Alcorn, Senator Evans, Senator Boysko, and Senator Surville. And then the Speaker of the House made his appointments. It is Delegate Sickles, Delegate Delaney, Delegate McClure, and Delegate Austin. And then also Paul Smedberg obviously will be serving as the Metro board member, and then Jason Stanford will be serving as the business community member for those. Those are the appointments that were made. We were just waiting on those. I think the letters finally went out this week. And so, we look forward to getting started on that, and that'll be the stuff that we'll be working on the interim. Obviously, Executive Director Matthijs will be on those as well, and then other folks from NVTC will be part of that group as well. So we're looking forward to working on that. And then the final thing is that today we have also heard there'll be yet again another special session, although it's really a continuation. They'll just be coming back to Richmond on June 28th. The speaker has called the House back in to deal with the Military Dependents Education Fund that I think everybody's been seeing in the news. So stay tuned for that. And I think that's all I've got. I'm happy to answer any questions if anybody has any.
Thanks, Ms. Perone-Seibert. Any questions from members of the commission? Commissioner Briskin.
I think this is the first time, House Bill 285, I think this is the first time I've seen something about a bus stop improvement program. And we were just talking about this at our transit summit. We have like 3 different bus stop programs in our CIP. One's for ADA compliance, one's for new bus stops, and one's to upgrade bus stops. And I'm trying to accelerate the upgrades of the bus stops because I'm tired of seeing our residents standing by sticks or tipping over Walmart carts so they have a bench to sit on. Is there any opportunity for jurisdictions to tap into this? Is this a fund? What is this?
I will probably have to go back and refresh my memory on that. I don't think I can give you an answer at the moment. I'm not sure. Kate, do you know off the top of your head more?
Yeah,
That's it.
yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. So indeed, this was about, more about streamlining approval processes. So this is not any additional funding. This would be using existing funds. And so I'm not an expert, but just, sort of following, Virginia Transit Association was very, in the forefront on this, was to do with basically permissions that had been forced to go through the Department of General Services. They've sort of been bumped to be a little bit more streamlined. My understanding is the ability to get approvals for things on the VDOT right away was very long. So this is attempting to make this so it's not such a laborious process.
Well, I'm sure that it'll help us with some of our bus stop construction because we certainly have right-of-way issues every time that we're doing a new development. So thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Delegates, Commissioner Sickles.
That's the first time I've ever been called commissioner.
Delegate Sickles, whatever you like.
The number on this first year, the 60 million, it was, WMATA asked for slightly less than that, but it's 60 million to cover the cost of a McKinsey level study or consultant to work on SJ 28. Is that it, Senator Evans? SJ 28. So there's money for a big study, and I don't know how, I guess, we get to help the state figure out how to spend that money the best way. I think it's $500,000.
Yes.
And it's within the 60 million.
And then this, yeah, I was gonna say the 60.
It's within the 60 million. Yeah. Cause y'all asked for 59 or something, some change.
Yeah, it should be half.
Yeah, great. Thank you for clarifying that, because there was some discussion a little early that Kate had already known about that I was catching up on the money for the study piece of it. Seeing no other questions, I will attempt, yes, Vice Chair Snyder.
Just a huge thank you to our legislative delegation for an incredible amount of work. This all the time, frankly, on behalf of the people of Northern Virginia and frankly, the people of all of Virginia, but especially this session. Thank you all very much.
Thank you. And I know in public moments of quiet and tons of conversations, so Senator Evan, Delegate Sickles, Senator Salim, Delegate Reed, Delegate Lopez, Delegate Krizek. I think I've got everybody not missed. It could be a previous error, but thank you very much. Well said, Vice Chair Snyder. So we'll go on now to the federal update. We may not have quite as good glowing news, but still we'd love to hear the report.
No, actually, I think we do have good glowing news because as we've been trying to do is highlight to you and your jurisdictions opportunities for federal grant applications. And so the Federal Transit Administration has a planning grant program that is specifically to foster transit-oriented development planning. And so that's actually included, materials are included, but that just opened in late May and applications are due on July 22nd. And so I believe there's actually a webinar and your staff are all been alerted to it. I'd like tomorrow to get a little bit more information. It is specifically related to bus rapid transit or rail, like your metro rail stations. But it is a wonderful opportunity to get some special, I think it's, 100%, probably 100% federal funding. I'm not even exactly sure, but it's a good chunk of federal funding to do planning on how to have transit-oriented development. I do believe, I think Alexandria got a grant last year to do some work over at Landmark Mall. So it is something our localities have laid in before. And again, we're going to be attempting to bring this to you and get this out to your jurisdictions every month, all the different grants that are out in the federal space, because there's actually a lot out there.
Great, and I think it's the case that NVTC could endorse
Yes.
applications.
Yes, we are happy to include that as a part of our, usually our consent agenda items and doing endorsements for transit supportive grant applications.
Great, thank you, Kate. Now we'll hear from our WMATA Committee Chair, Alcorn.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We have a
As you mentioned, we did have a joint committee meeting on May 16th, and we talked back then about all the various efforts underway to find a sustainable, long-term, dedicated funding source for transit in Northern Virginia. A little conversation already about that this evening. There is a lot going on, a lot of work here at NVTC, within Virginia, and then of course, with the DMV moves around the region. So NVTC is right in the middle of this, and we're gonna hear from Alan in just a minute, who's gonna walk us through, at least at a high level, the efforts that are underway and the value that NVTC brings to the table. So just a reminder, I think we all know this is the beginning of this process. So there are a lot of meetings in front of us. So take it away.
All right, thank you, Commissioner Alcorn. The next slide, please. This is one of our new slides we've actually put together, and it kind of highlights the challenge we've been having. We've been talking about this for a long time. Since 1979, obviously that's the year I was born. Since then, we've been talking about long-term dedicated funding for Metro. So it's a long time in coming. So we've done a lot of work. A lot of other organizations across the DC area have done a lot of work. This is just one quick snapshot of what, just reminding us that ever elusive goal we're going to keep working towards. And NVTC is in the middle of it. And this funds directly comes straight from the work that we did last year. One of the things you have up there is NVTC's 2023 annual report on Metro that we sent to the General Assembly and the governor. So seeking long-term sustainable dedicated funding was part of that. We're carrying that forward. So I just wanted to highlight that. Next slide, please. So as Commissioner Alcorn mentioned, NVTC is in the middle of this. There's a lot of moving parts. We have several different things going on. We talked a little bit already about SJ28. Amy brought us up to speed on all the members. DMV moves. There's a meeting next Monday where Commissioner Member and others here will be at that meeting. NVTC will be there as well. And also we have, as part of what's going on here in our annual program at NVTC, is the annual report for 2024. All of these things are working together. NVTC is right there in the middle of it. We have a lot of really important work that we've done leading up to this from the last couple of years. As I mentioned, the annual report, but also last year we had the Metro Operating Funding and Reform Working Group report. A lot of really in-depth research that we've done here to educate stakeholders. We used that during the General Assembly this year. We've used it here at commission meetings to talk about what this problem is, define this problem. And what we as staff are doing is using this work to educate you all, help you all, inform you all, looking at policy, important considerations going forward. One key part I don't want to forget about is there's an elected level here at the commission, DMV moves, SJ28, but there's also that really, really important staff level. So that's the coordination with our transit agencies and jurisdictions. Last year, we ran a working group process here at NVTC. We're going to plan to revisit that again to make sure that all of your staff are very well informed as information comes out of each one of these, making sure that information is shared with them, making sure we're pulling it all together and helping Virginia speak with a single voice. Because SJ28, our report and our work is focused on Northern Virginia, but we have to remember everything we're doing in Virginia is feeding into that bigger DMV news. We're part of the bigger region. Maryland's done a lot of work when it comes to their revenue and policy. We've done a lot, DC's done a lot. So all these are fitting together to make sure that we're working all together at once. Next. So kind of stepping back of like, what are we focused on here at NVTC? So basically we've talked about the fact that it's the long-term sustainable dedicated funding. That is for capital and operating. Operating has been the really elusive one. We have dedicated capital funding now, but as we've talked about over the years, that money expires in 2028, 2029. We're going to run out of that capacity that we got passed back in 2018. How do we keep that moving forward? As we talked about also during last year's, this isn't just about a Metro solve anymore. It's about all of transit in Northern Virginia. All of our agencies are leading towards different points and different speeds and times of when they're going to hit that unsustainability and where they need a fundamental reset of the type of resources they need. So that's Metro, that's VRE, our local transit systems. Obviously, Metro will be the biggest number, but those numbers that other agencies have are just as important to keep those systems moving forward. A big part of this is also going to be maintaining our partnership with the Commonwealth. We have a long history of working closely with them. The amount of funding that we get from the Commonwealth is very important. Virginia is one of the few states where the state is really heavily involved in transit, and also just here in Northern Virginia, the Kentucky State. So maintaining that really good partnership we have with them to maintain and ensure we have those transit commitments that they have moving forward. Part of the work is going to look at cost containment. That's always one of the big things we've talked about exhaustively with Metro on that front, the 3% cap. We've talked about that. The need to revisit that. What does that cost containment look like? We've identified some of the challenges of the 3% cap. What does that look like in a post-pandemic transit world? Things fundamentally shifted. There were some unintended consequences that came out of that, and that's an area we can dive into to make sure that we're really keeping track of controlling costs, but in a way that actually makes sense and that's sustainable long term. MVTC is also documenting and communicating the needs of our agencies. Metro does a great job every year through their budget process, their long-term CIP, their capital needs inventory, really getting information about what their fiscal needs are going forward. A lot of our agencies do the same thing through what's called a transit strategic plan. DRPT requires each one of our agencies to do that every year. It's a 10-year map of capital and operating needs, helps you lay out what the needs are. So we're going to pull all that together, working very closely with all those other processes, all those other studies going on to make sure everybody's informed about what Virginia's needs are. And also, as I talked about earlier, educating stakeholders, whether it's in the General Assembly outside of Northern Virginia or regional bodies, or talking to folks in Maryland and DC so they understand the unique funding and governance structure in Virginia. I know folks come here like Mr. Clark and say, he doesn't understand, Virginia's complicated, it's complicated. It's complicated, but it works. And I think we've got a really good system over here. We're making sure they understand how the complications of Virginia works and how it fits into that greater model of the greater DC area. And also, coordinating policy, funding, and legislative analysis. The working group I talked about, that's going to be a really core function of that, making sure we're understanding what's happening in DMV moves, what's happening with SJ 28, what's happening in Maryland and DC, so we're all talking and having those conversations. So making sure you all are well informed and well briefed on the issue you need to know. It does fit into the bigger regional focus. DMV moves is one way, but we've talked about this for a while across the region. There is a regional vision for transit, that's DMV moves. And then again, for Metro, is that focus on long-term dedicated capital funding for Metro. So really important stuff, a lot of moving parts as Mr. Alcorn mentioned. So lots of meetings, staff, and for all of you coming forward, but it's going to be, I think, a really well-oiled machine with MVTC in the middle, making sure we're sharing information in an effective way. Next slide. So I did want to mention a little bit of, we got a briefing back at the WMATA committee a couple weeks ago. The regional bus analysis is some work that MVTC has been doing. It's a really important element of defining what those needs are. Looking at those strategic plans that I mentioned a little bit earlier, basically looking at what are their needs on a 10-year horizon, their fiscally constrained plans. They get regularly updated because guess what? Things change. Plans change over the course of a year. You get different funding, you move stuff around. So that's a really big fundamental part of what we're going to be talking about. The analysis here looks at the transit agencies that are within the NVTC district, all of you are represented, but also includes some of our partners down in PRTC on the line. So that's included in here as well, and they'll be a long-term partner as well with this. And one of the things, even though we're talking about these strategic plans, I'll make sure as we put those numbers out there, we remind people that those numbers are going to change from time to time. There are a lot of things that impact what you put in a plan this year may change by next year because there are factors that are outside of our control. Inflation, supply chain, we've been through that in a really crazy way through the pandemic the last couple of years. One of the challenges the transit industry is dealing with right now with bus manufacturer consolidation, slowing things down, it's driving up costs. It's a challenge the whole industry, not just Northern Virginia is dealing with. Then there's labor agreements. We're seeing more and more of those in Virginia. Those have costs that are baked in over multiple years. And as different agreements get negotiated, those all have to be factored in. So those are all different things that go into those financial considerations are kind of a little bit bigger than an actual individual agency. And also, the flip side of that is what are the resources that you as jurisdictions have to pay and for the investment in transit. That's one consideration as well. And then the fundamental thing that I always try to remind people I talk about is like transit is really important. We spend all of our time talking about transit here, but we understand at the same time, transit is competing with other services, competing with everything else you have to deal with in your jurisdiction. So how does that fit within the bigger picture? So I wanted to take a little bit of a step back of there's a lot to tackle here. We're focusing on the transit side, but there are these big factors we really have to think about because you all think about it holistically as well, because you're not just thinking about transit, you're thinking about schools and police and all those other things that are really necessary. Next slide. So this just kind of relays out the different groups a little bit differently. I won't go through in great detail, but it kind of encapsulates everything that I talked about, all the work that we at MVTC, the team here is going to do to inform all of you at the commission and different committee levels. We had a little bit of discussion at the executive committee earlier on how we can do that, the best way to feed all this information through all the different ways we do it. Obviously, we'll have our report this year, the 2024 report that's due to the General Assembly in December. You'll hear a lot more about that in greater detail in the fall, because we hope that is going to encapsulate a lot of the work that we do through all these other processes over the next couple of months. SJ 28, I guess my slide is now out of date because we do have those appointments now. We're waiting to work with those folks out there. I know Amy is working closely with getting us set up to talk to people down there so we can brief up on those, help people understand how Northern Virginia functions and the importance of that. And then the DMV moves, there's going to be multiple meetings over the next many months. I think the plan is to wrap up by May, June of next year. And we heavily engaged with that. There's a lot of meetings with the Government Partners Advisory Committee, MVTC, and our Northern Virginia Transit agencies are going to be represented there. So a lot of moving parts. A lot of stuff for us to track, a lot of communication with you all, a lot of communication with your staff, and fortunately lots of meetings. So we're preparing for that. The team is beefing up on that right now. We're really getting prepared of how we can manage that information and boil it down so everybody is well informed. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions about the work that staff here is planning to do over the next several months.
Questions, Brown?
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
I think someone needs to work on how the study money for SJ 28 is going to be spent. During the session, there was concern that we would do things without regional cooperation, without Maryland and DC. I still think that's a concern. So if DRPT hopefully will not be doing this on their own. And we need to make sure that how the study is conducted is done in a way that our partners across the river are not will be part of and join, so when it's done, they're going to say, what is this, right? To bring them with us as we go. And to make sure the administration just doesn't do what they want to do without our input. So I hope you can do that, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. That's a conversation that we've not gotten to yet, but I think Ms. Mattice, we're several of us trying to have that conversation all the time. Glad you made the point, for sure. Make a note of it and follow up. Other questions for me or for Commissioner Chair Alcorn or Mr. Cox? Seeing none. Not wanting to rush too much, but wanting to keep us moving. We will move on to item 7, which is a report from the chair of the Program Advisory Committee, which is former chair of the whole commission, Delia Pouch.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Very good hands. I'll try to keep it brief so we can all go into a little one. The Program Advisory Committee has had a very busy spring, but really the staff have worked very hard to continue to put a few bodies of work for the commission that they'll be presenting to our little overview. First, we have 2 actions related to the IDC Leader Choice Program and a presentation on one of my favorites, Route 7 BRT, in which staff will lay out their approach to enhancing our existing transit service on Route 7 while we plan to make more projects down the road. So we're looking more into the midterm has come in with all of that. And finally, staff provided us with a draft of MVTC strategic transit policy research and roadmap. And we'll consider that next month for
So we'll now turn it over to Alan to walk us through the individual actions, and that will be followed by the bus rapid transit.
Thank you, Commissioner Polcheck. As she said, we have two action items tonight. The first one is approving resolution 2534, which is approving the I-66 Commuter Choice Program project for submission to the Commonwealth Transportation Board and authorize the executive director to execute the standard project agreements. So in front of you, we do have a one pager that has a list of all the different projects that we're planning to fund tonight, or what staff is proposing and recommending, and which has been endorsed by the PAC, approved by the committee. So basically we have 15 projects, and then we have our administrative budget, and then we have one other study, an I-66 needs assessment study, which Daniel will talk about in a moment. But I do want to highlight the work that we've done every year, as we do with every cycle on the public outreach. This year, we did receive 92 comments submitted, 89 by our survey, 3 by mail. They're broadly supportive of the projects under consideration for funding the program. We did a significant amount of outreach on Facebook, Instagram with Chair Polcheck's reading video, which was reached by over 9,300 users and yielded 900 click links so folks could go through. This click-through stats were about evenly split between English and Spanish. So we're trying to make sure we get out their multilingual approach to all of our public outreach. And we got about 1,500 views on our comment webpage. They may not have all submitted written comments, but that number of folks went all the way through to look at the information that's on the website. So the action we're asking for tonight will basically approval by the commission. This does go forward to the CTB, which meets on June 18th. And what will happen is they will incorporate this into their FY25 and 2025 to 2030 6-year improvement plan that they're set. So that's in a couple of weeks' time. So the action site, since it's over, we forward it out to them. So that's the first action. And I'm going to have Daniel talk a little bit about the second action, and then we can move back to the
Yeah, thanks, Alan. So as discussed at last month's commission meeting, included in the FY 25-26 I-66 Commuter Choice Program of projects in funding to undertake a needs assessment study that would identify a menu of future projects in the I-66 corridor. The needs assessment would be completed in partnership with DRPT and would evaluate current and anticipated future travel needs in the corridor between Haymarket and Roslyn and identify multimodal transportation projects to address these needs that could be supported through I-66 Commuter Choice and or DRPT I-66 outside the Beltway. In the needs assessment, a pipeline of both short and long-term transit and other multimodal projects that applicants could use in future calls for projects would be developed through a quantitative assessment of current and future travel in the corridor and an identification of gaps in current service, as well as with robust engagement with corridor jurisdictions, transit agencies, as well as a review of existing plans and programs. So NBTC and DRPT anticipate a $500,000 total budget for the needs assessment, with each agency contributing $250,000. If approved by the commission, NBTC and DRPT will issue an RFP shortly using DRPT's GPC bench contract, which includes consultants that have been competitively procured in compliance with Virginia Public Procurement Act. NBTC's executive director would be authorized to execute a contract with the selected firm, saving time in the procurement process and ensuring that the final I-66 needs assessment would be completed with sufficient time to inform the next I-66 commuter choice for projects, which would open in fall 2025. So with that, happy to answer any questions on that.
Thank you, Daniel and Alan. We'll open it up for questions. Yes,
Just to
Chair Croucher.
clarify for us, but also for our new members, I believe these are the numbers right at this point. We had a total of 66 million to date, and 66 commuter choice plus the 30, almost 31 million in this round, so almost. Almost 27 million.
The number keeps growing every year. I think we were at 150 last year, combined total between 395 and 66 is going to put us up to around 180.
So a good time to do that needs assessment. I think they really understand. I think as we were going into their staff, so I was going to worry how much will come in and trying to figure out where to put that funding. So hopefully through conversations, understanding where those needs are and working with our jurisdictions.
Yes, there'll be very heavy engagement with everybody is eligible along there. 66 is a very different corridor than 93, 95 and 95. It hasn't really come back in this quite the same way post-pandemic. It's two different things, but things have been going out there for a while. We have a long-term plan for the funding, so just make sure that we're using it the best way possible, getting the best projects that are going to be the most effective. There will be very heavy engagement with folks along the entire corridor, VDOT, PRPT, all the agencies, along with all the transit agencies, FRA, BRE, everybody we can think of to make sure it's very.
Great, thank you for giving that context to new members, and also earlier Chair Smithberg, I do think for new members that want you to feel fully included and not intimidated by my 6-month-old daughter. I will say, the only other point that I would mention is that Kate, we should talk about, I was not asked to do a video, and Chair Palchek has lit up Facebook and social media. Onward to, we will do a block vote on the 2 commuter choice actions unless they're.
By the way, Monique makes you look amazing and gets on the right seat behind you. I don't know how.
That's great. So we will approve the motion. Can I have a motion to approve resolution 2534, approve the. Okay, that's the I-66 commuter choice program of projects, and I will ask that both of you agree that the motion also includes the executive authorizing the executive director to issue an RFP for I-66 needs assessment and to execute the contract award. I think that was moved by Commissioner Briskman, is that correct? And seconded by Commissioner Karantonis. And so we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, that's item 7A and 7B. We did mention that in item 7, there's also 7C, which I think if you folks around the table will very, very much be interested in, which is the Route 7 BRT strategic implementation plan. I will send it back to Mr. 5 to introduce this item. And I think we have additional staff, Vikram, who will speak to it. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. So this briefing is to be focused on the new approach that staff has been developing to advance BRT along Route 7. I had a great discussion with PAC, Program Advisory Committee, on vision for transit on BRT on Route 7. The Program Advisory Committee met and got a really deep dive, really granular dive. We're going to pull it a little bit up here for the commission and to make sure we're respectful of time as well. But I think one way that we've really started thinking about this project is it's a giant puzzle that MBTC is putting together, and it's really complicated, and Vikram has been tossed into the deep end of the pool to figure out how to put it all together and make sure it all works. We have a lot of partners, jurisdictions, transit agencies, funding partners, planning partners, as well as the public and businesses along the corridor. That's going to be a really big part of the next phase of analysis we do, making sure we're out there talking to the public, educating them about what the project is and what the benefits are and how important it is. This includes partners, local, regional, Commonwealth, federal, all of which have brought funding to the table well. So thank you all for your sustained commitment to this project and moving it forward. And all these folks, all these organizations and stakeholders are going to be vital to the success of the So Vikram's been working behind the scenes to put all the puzzle pieces together and is here to walk you through our work. Vikram.
Thank you. That was a great introduction. My name is Vikram Sinha, Senior Program Manager for Vision Route 7. Slide. So just diving into it, regional context, this is part of the region's expansive transit network. This is a route that connects to multiple metro rail as well as planned BRT lines, access to major job centers, and is one of 5 BRT projects planned in the region. Metroway currently in operation, Duke Street in motion, West End Transitway are in planning progress, the one in Fairfax County. So a lot of great projects kind of tying together, and we're really excited for this one. Slide, please. The vision for BRT on Route 7, we're looking at a 14-mile route through 4 jurisdictions, going from Northwest, Tyson, starting down Route 7, connecting to West Falls Church, coming through the city of Falls Church, going to East Falls Church Metro Station, then proceeding for a little bit in Arlington, kind of jumping through different jurisdictions, going back into Falls Church and back into Fairfax County at Seven Corners, Bailey's Crossroads, and we're proposing that the BRT treatment end at the Mark Center. We'll talk a little later about that endpoint and some of the conversations we're looking to have with that. This is a great line because it's got very high ridership. It has frequent high capacity service, and the connection to multiple Metro Rail stations is really great. Next slide, please. So what you're seeing today is Route 7 has a thriving Metro bus service. That is the 28A. This map that you're seeing on the right kind of shows you the differences between our BRT alignment as well as the 28A in red. The different colors denote the different phases of the project. 4.0 was actually led by Fairfax County and completed. 4-1 was recently completed by NVTC, and phase 4.2 NVTC led again, just to complete that planning phase. The 28A itself is a success story. It runs every 12 minutes during business hours, let's call it, and then 30 minutes in off hours. Extremely high ridership, 7,741 daily riders in April, 67% above pre-pandemic levels. So that's a great story for transit, not only for the region, but for this whole country. That's a great statistic. And I want to also just say that this is the 9th highest ridership in the Metro bus system. So that's Virginia, DC, and Maryland. So this is a really, really great line. The 28A is getting a lot of use, and we just want to build on that success. Next slide, please. Our proposed approach to transform the 28A into BRT is to kind of break it into two different pieces. One is to layer bus improvements and increase frequency for the 28A to recognize the success it's enjoying now and to deliver to the community better bus service. And the second approach is to implement BRT on a longer timeline. The longer timeline requires NEPA design construction before it enters operation. We believe that short-term phase enhancements will build towards that longer-term vision. During this process, we're also recognizing that it's context sensitive. We want to build multimodal treatments that support local needs and expectations. So we recognize that one solution does not fit for all 4 of our respective jurisdictions that the 28A proceeds through, as well as the BRT project. We're also looking at better bus service that can be achieved in advance of a major capital project. Next slide, please. So the proposed approach to transform the 28A into BRT, NVTC's Envision Route 7 strategic implementation plan will lead us to that. It's 2 concurrent efforts. Again, we're looking to layer the bus improvements. And what are those improvements? They're targeted with work in our partnering jurisdictions on things from the toolbox, such as transit signal priority, queue jumps, bus stop improvements, traffic signal optimization, just to name a few. And then in a longer term, BRT planning, that it means the upcoming planning phase, 4-2, from Seven Corners down to the Mark Center, and working to advance major capital project planning for phase 4.0, which is the Fairfax County-led portion from Spring Hill Metro to I-66. We see the strategic implementation plan as a living document. It is by no means a one and done document. We plan to update it and use it to not only guide progress, but track progress. Next slide, please. So here you see the layering of bus improvements over time. On the right is an animation of queue jumps. And on the left is our inspirational project, the currently in service Metroway. On the top left, you see dedicated transit lanes. That occurs in Alexandria with Metroway, whereas in the bottom left, you're seeing a picture of the same Metroway in a shared street configuration that includes multimodal access. You're seeing a bicyclist operating in the lane with the proper lane markings for that, as well as a bus lane, as well as general car traffic. So we're using the Metroway as inspiration for this so that we can see what would work in which part of the route and kind of use those treatments to get the bus to improve, but also recognizing that our jurisdictions have plans for the location as well. Next slide, please. So in the region, we're seeing over $500 million in capital projects that will benefit Route 7 BRT. They run the gamut of projects, but just working from top left down through the corridor, we're seeing a widening of Route 7, which will work in conjunction with the Phase 4.0 BRT supportive infrastructure. So that will enable BRT operations in Fairfax County down to I-66. Within Falls Church, Smart City Project, Transit Signal Priority, which will both help improve traffic signals and give the 28A better productivity coming through Falls Church. North Washington Street Multimodal Transportation Project, which will be a great project to just improve the streetscape and help implement better bus treatments as the 28A travels north into Arlington. Traffic signal upgrades, which will help not only the bus, but motorists as well. Those are just general traffic signal upgrades that will be great. And that will enable future transit signal priority upgrades in Arlington. Expansion of bus bays in East Falls Church will allow for additional bus service, including BRT 7 Corners Ring improvements in Fairfax County, which I don't think I need to mention, just needs those improvements very badly to improve everybody's experience, all roadway users. Intersection improvements in Alexandria, that's Beauregard and King Street. That's a troublesome intersection, but in talking to our partners in Alexandria, we learned that they're planning improvements to this intersection, which is where we're proposing that the BRT come through. So we feel confident placing a bus stop there as part of future plans, because these intersection improvements will enable pedestrian safety. And then of course, the West End Transitway. Just want to note that these projects were all pulled in coordination with all of your respective staff. They were very helpful and we've been a good conversation in kind of thinking about what projects will help the bus service or pedestrians and folks to get to the meeting. Next slide, please. So our proposed road approach is with the role that NVTC has. Primarily, we're going to oversee the execution of strategic implementation plan. We're also managing the federal community project funding, which is a fancy word of saying federal earmark, as well as the DRPT grant. We are scoping our environmental analysis work. We will be leading the Phase 4.2 study that we're planning to initiate in the fall. Those have two major parts to it that, or subtasks rather, sorry, that we're looking to include with that. One is to have a conversation around what the southern terminus of the BRT should be, whether it should be the Mark Center or Southern Towers. Both have very, very strong reasons to have the BRT in there, but we want to have a conversation with the community as well as Alexandria about what works for them. Falls Church, we're planning to also work in conjunction with the staff there in analysis on business activity turning lanes versus HOV, high occupancy vehicle lanes, as well as queue jump layout cross sections on North Washington. So those parts of the study will help us advance that conversation and look at what's feasible. In addition to that, we're looking to provide a coordination forum to resolve regional questions. Sycamore Roosevelt bus priority is one that's come up. We're looking to reconcile the 28A and BRT alignments, bringing Metro into that conversation. And then lastly, we're looking to enable transit connectivity between the Columbia Pike and Route 7 bus routes. That's one that's come up in a couple of different forms. So we're looking to have all of our jurisdictional staff come together and kind of talk out, solution out how we can get a better customer experience there. Lastly, we will be providing updates to commissioners, PAC, MAC, as well as the respective city county boards. I will be coming to Fairfax County on June 18th to the Transportation Committee as an example of that. Looking forward to that conversation. Next slide, please. Lastly, federal and regional coordination. We have included Vision Route 7 in COG's Transportation Planning Board Transportation Improvement Plan. That's key to enable the use of our federal funds for this project. That has been sponsored by DRPT, so we're very appreciative to them. DRPT is also a potential funding partner for implementation as well as a current funding partner. And then Federal Transit Administration will be managing that grant on behalf of the federal government, the community project funding. It is also a potential funding partner for future implementation, either through the CIG Capital Improvement Grant Program or other funding opportunities with USDOT or FTA programs. And then FTA has also been very supportive, providing feedback and guidance through NEPA and planning efforts. Next, not last, NVTA, Northern Virginia Transportation Authority, has been really helpful, providing a coordination forum to talk through with the preliminary deployment plan for BRT in the region. They are also a potential funding partner for implementation. And then lastly is Metro, which is incorporating NVTC's BRT alignment into their bus network redesign effort, investigating feasibility of higher frequency bus service. And lastly is providing us data to help us identify solutions to pain points for bus service. Next slide, please. So next steps, quite briefly, going to Fairfax County again on the 18th. We are looking this summer to activate the federal funding with the FTA. In the fall, we'll be releasing the RFP for phase 4-2. Continuing conversations with our regional partners as well as member jurisdictions. And then we're looking to have the commission acceptance of the strategic implementation plan that fall, and then over the winter award the contract for 2, and then continuing those same conversations and looking to sort of integrate some bus priority treatments with our jurisdiction. And that is it.
Thank you, Vikram. I'm sure we'll have questions on this. We'll start with Commissioner Bagley and then to Commissioner Bierman.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Vikram, for the presentation and all the work on this. I'm really excited about it. I wanted to ask a kind of specific question, honestly, when you referenced about Southern Terminus and
Yes.
Southern Tower or Smart Center. The question I had is actually related to like community engagement. I know the commission's done great work and it's been cited tonight on activating for the Spanish speaking community and getting feedback in Spanish. But in that corridor specifically, there's a lot of Arabic and Amharic and now like Pashto and Dari. I recognize the challenges that go into that, but I think the extent you're doing specific engagement in that community, it might be worth, you know, whatever can be attempted there, because that's where those languages are concentrated. So I'm curious if you've already given some thought to how you might incorporate those opportunities.
That's really good feedback. I appreciate that. We've worked closely with city staff. I think city staff will probably lead that outreach because it's city territory, but make sure we're respectful of that and all of the processes you have in place, playing a supportive role on that. Great feedback. I think that's something we can take back to them as well to make sure that we're covering all those aspects. We haven't scoped it out quite yet, but we will be doing that in the scoping process to figure out what exactly that looks like and how we can help leverage the amount of outreach we need to with the city as a partner.
No, I appreciate that. And I was trying to get ahead of sort of that fall RFP, you know, so that they can be thinking about that piece. And then you mentioned like coordinating with local staff. We're obviously in the middle of Duke Street in Motion and doing a lot of community engagement with sort of homeowners associations and riders on those lines. And so just would encourage you, we've had really some success of late with that commission. And so to the extent that like our staff can share any of the outreach that worked, you know, and some of the unique methods they use. I know they were doing bus stop based pop-ups. My colleague, you know, I'm not to steal his thunder, but I know this is something you really pushed for. So just wanted to lift that up as additional engagement tools.
Great, really glad you mentioned it. Certainly Southern Towers, I've been in Zoom calls that have reflected Diversity Beyond, and so I really hope you will ask that question. We'll go first to Commissioner Bierman and then back to you, Commissioner Pelletier.
Very nice job. I'm looking forward to hearing your presentation again and when you come before the Transportation Committee. with the benefit of some state partners in the room, I will say, while 72% of statistics are made up on the spot, I am sure that at least 50% of my job, it seems, at the local level is fighting the VDOT. So I was wondering, is VDOT on board with all of these good ideas such as queue jumps, transit signal priority, bus stop, transit signal optimization? It seems whenever we have a good idea, VDOT tells me why we can't do it. So where are we at on those?
That is a great question, Commissioner. So I know Fairfax County staff has been in a lot of contact with VDOT to make sure that their intentions around Route 7 BRT are jive and are not, for lack of a better term, dead on arrival. So that we definitely recognize that as a risk, but also as an opportunity, right? Within Falls Church, ownership of the roadway changes, so that's a different conversation. Within Arlington as well, slightly different conversation. I think VDOT as a whole, we're looking to have a conversation with them as we enter into 4.2 and kind of see what is feasible, not feasible to bring a bus rapid transit treatment to the corridor in Seven Corners down through Bailey's Crossroads. But we're hopeful that they're a little bit willing to have a conversation because it's a great project. The idea makes sense. And I think even traffic engineers understand that the roadway can only handle so much capacity. And so getting better mode share, right? Having people choose the bus over other forms of transit only helps that road be more efficient. And putting in economic terms, right, you're increasing the efficiency of the roadway, it gets better productivity out of it. So we're looking to have that kind of conversation. But yeah, it is definitely on our radar. I understand that.
Okay, well, good to have the state partners in the room as well.
Yeah.
Before any of these good ideas get shot down. Thanks.
I feel like there's an 83% chance that that might be a good idea.
You guys.
On this, but
Commissioner Paul, see you in June.
Thank you. No, a couple of comments on that and after almost 5 years of that, I understand where you're coming from, but I do know it's a little bit of why it takes a bit of time, and I know our staff continue to engage very actively involved. Sometimes it sounds like, why are we wanting roads? We know that that's how we fund this project, right? All the road lines. So I think that's one of the things that we definitely need to get more help getting the message across, especially with the Seven Corners and the Ring Road project, right? Helping understand that it is not for cars, so this one, well, that's transit, without the cars, because that's would get beat up. So, but to that, I guess I have one more comment on the excellent work. I mean, I'm so excited, even though it's so long and but on the language thing, absolutely. On the Fairfax County side, our new Office of Public Affairs language team is exceptional. And have brought in a great, much better improved partners for outsourcing as well, materials for all languages. So definitely happy to connect you with them. We stole them from the schools. And then on the other pieces, I think the big question is going to be sort of on the chart on page 10, the second row, right? First of all, these key partners in coordination. First, you've got the local authorities who have so many projects on their plate, including we're still working on Route 1. And I know that issues, and I love that you're trying to find ways that we can increment or a little bit the work. And then definitely, I hope, are you looking at ways to be helpful? I know MBTA is already there, but for some of these others, as we are going through the ability to look at partners for implementation and funding, you could talk a little bit more about how that works.
Yeah, so there's different opportunities. I think DRPT's merit program comes to mind as a key one for the region that I don't think gets discussed a lot. So we're looking to have a conversation with Falls Church maybe around that one, because that's a slightly smaller project, but allow for demonstration as well as planning. So that'd be great. NVTA's is more capital program based. So as we get further along, we talk about constructing NVTA's money comes into play. in a call with FTA, they were supportive of different NOFOs or notice of funding opportunities. I know Kate mentioned one earlier, but there's others that are out there just to help, not just from the FTA, but also FHWA, which is the Federal Highway Administration, as well as just federal DOT in general. You know, the recently passed infrastructure law really helps with providing funds for jurisdictions to think about it. So we're trying to have a conversation with the folks about, here's the opportunity, here's what you would do, and let's go for it. We'll hold your hand and work with you. We definitely want to be a resource for the region on that.
Yeah, and I appreciate it, because, you know, they have so many things that they're working on for you to be able to really help hone in and do that extra legwork that helps them be more prepared. Would be very helpful. Thank you.
Great, Commissioner Karen Tennison.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I actually, it is a good follow-up on Commissioner Palchik's comments. So I understood that the IRA is potentially helpful if we can show that we are serving underserved communities. So, and actually, this is a route that goes through a lot of underserved communities. And I mean, really a lot. The question is, do we collect the data? Do we have enough? I mean, do we know about the model split, for example, et cetera? I can, you know, go for hours about how Palmer residents commute or, you know, go to work or, you know, a Beauregard corridor residents. Sure.
Yeah, I mean, we can definitely follow up with you on some information, but I'd say like a good starting place for us would be just the census, the ACS, American Community Survey, has a lot of good information, including primary and secondary languages spoken at the home. But you know, there's a lot of data out there. So we can definitely follow up with you and give you an idea of like what kind of data we're using and how we're planning to use it, as well as what kind of data our potential Ford 2 study lead would use.
The second question is the question of scoping. So you talk, for example, the connection to Metro and the connection to Columbia Pike system, et cetera. So are these facilities part of the scoping of this, or are they a secondary or a follow-up project?
I wouldn't say they're a follow-up project just yet, but I think it is a conversation that we're gonna have as part of this to talk about and identifying opportunities, but this is just a planning phase. So part of that planning phase requires us to talk about what opportunities there are, and we can try to work through in a coordination forum what the next steps are. We don't own the roadway, we don't run the bus service, so we're presenting ourselves as a expert in the room, bringing people together, and then having the conversation drawn out across regional borders. Because a lot of times, I'm finding that, you know, staff is talking in terms of desire of something, but then is frustrated that it may not, their partner across the region, they haven't had the conversation with them. So we're trying to set up those forums to talk about how we can better serve the region overall.
Yeah, one of the things that I've noticed many times in the region, also in places where we realized hubs, is that we don't pay attention to the frequency and the coordination. We do the frequency, but we don't coordinate. And there is normally a system that commands the frequency. If you run every 12 minutes, then others have to run as well. Connection opportunities every 12 minutes, just a little bit.
Right, the customer would be very frustrated if the 28A was scheduled to show up 2 minutes after the train pulls out of East Falls Church. Absolutely.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Sure. Okay.
Not that that happens right now. Just.
I think that's a different form of opportunity. Maybe, Mr. Karantonis, you can follow up and see if you can help a little bit with the data and the other pieces, but good questions for sure. So yes, Commissioner Aguirre.
I don't know if I'm the sole person in here, but the probably most frequent user of the 28A, I'm definitely very vested in this route. But, you know, I wish a little bit more of it was in Alexandria because we wouldn't have to deal with some of the VDOT issues and some, you know, signal queuing and everything. But looking forward to making that happen across the rest of the region. I'd also echo what my colleague, Commissioner Bagley brought up. Southern Towers is within itself kind of a mini metropolis. So I'm glad that you'll be looking at the ACS to try and pull out the languages that are most spoken. And also, when you're at Fairfax County, you know, I would definitely extend a hand to Board Member Jimenez, because he has a long history of working within those communities, whether it's Bailey's Crossroads or Colmore. I personally have done a lot of work there too, so I'm happy to help in that regard. And last plug one more time between what several of my colleagues have said, Mr. Terraconis, Ms. Palchek, when it comes to equity and engagement and being able to service these communities that have been a backbone when it comes to the workforce and are extremely important. You know, when we were going through the pandemic and we were talking about those that still have to go to work and everything, we want to keep that in mind on top of the other economic benefits that this is going to bring. So the more that we can have those individuals at the table, the better. Hence, using pop-ups, meeting the residents where they are, utilizing some of the community groups that are already existing. The one that immediately comes to mind is the More Friends group that meets monthly. So lots of different things to talk about, but I'm looking forward to engaging once we begin this phase.
Thank you for that.
And it's certain extra qualification as the person probably providing that route the most. So thank you for raising the equity concerns. With that, we will move on to the written materials. Thanks for the presentation, Victor. And we'll move on to item 8. There will still be action on July 18th to accept the roadmap that is in written material, the strategic transit policy research roadmap, which is also in the strategic in the material. In addition to that, item 8, VRE CEO Rich Dalton is here tonight to give his report. Often they're brief, and they have a little more to add tonight. There's a few things happening. Chair Bagley will present the VRE action items, followed by a block vote on the 3 resolutions. But first, correction, I think it's over to you, Mr. Dalton, for because a CEO report and perhaps minutes as well.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good evening, Commissioners. Just, you do have the CEO report in your package. Just wanted to report, just unaudited, from a total ridership standpoint for the month of May. Still showing a relatively strong increase since the beginning of the year. May was our second highest ridership month in the last 12 months. Again, obviously not as fast as we'd like it to be, but nonetheless still headed in the correct direction. We still are having some opportunities out there with system performance, system reliability. We do have, there are some measures that will be put in place. Specifically, a lot of our issues come in the PM coming out of Washington Union Terminal. Amtrak does have a very extensive program going on that will address some of the infrastructure issues up there. That'll occur over the summer, so we're obviously anxious for that to occur, but nonetheless, we're still dealing with not just congestion with other Amtrak trains, but freight trains as well. I did also want to just point to the I'd ask that you have this press release that went out on Tuesday, where it basically announced that the Virginia Passenger Rail Authority is in discussions with the Norfolk Southern Railroad for the acquisition of the Manassas line. The press release goes on to speak to the also some opportunities for specifically with VPRA and Norfolk Southern and the New River Valley area. And it does go on to say that at this point, just wanted to mention there's a framework established to advance these negotiations. VRE is part of that. And where this topic frankly had been on simmer for the last couple of months, it's frankly at a full boil right now. So over the course of the next couple of months, and specifically, I'll be a little optimistic here at the July meeting, might be able to provide some more additional information. But I also just wanted to point out, and Vice Chair Bagley will get to this here in the resolutions. I'm seeking authorization to extend our existing operating access agreement with Norfolk Southern. Yes, it ties back to this topic as well. So, Mr. Chair, that's my report.
Great. Any questions for Mr. Dalton before we go to Ms. Bagley for the action items? Seeing none, we'll go straight to you, Ms. Bagley, Commissioner Bagley.
All right, thank you, Chair. So we have 3 actions tonight to consider. I'm going to move through all 3 of them together, correct?
Yep.
For discussion and a vote. For action 8B, the VRE Operations Board recommends commission approval of resolution 2535, which will authorize the VRE CEO to amend the contract for operating services for commuter rail with Keolis Rail Services Virginia by approving up to $19,763,000 for the 5th year of the second option period for a total contract value not to exceed $269,480,057 through June 30th, 2025. This will continue the contracted services for management, supervision, and certified locomotive engineers and conductors to operate VRE commuter rail trains for FY 2025. This is the final year of the 5-year option period for this contract. 8C is for the VRE board recommends commission approval of resolution 2536, which will authorize the VRE CEO to amend the contract for maintenance services for commuter rail with Keolis Rail Services Virginia LLC by approving up to $12,273,550 for the 4th year of the first option period for a total contract value not to exceed $83,025,329 through June 30th, 2025. This action will authorize contracted services for the maintenance, inspection, and repairs of VRE locomotive, passenger rail cars, and maintenance facilities for FY 2025. And the final action for 8D, the VRE Operations Board recommends commission approval of resolution 2537, which will authorize the VRE Chief Executive Officer to extend the current term of the operating access agreement with Norfolk Southern Railway Company to expire on December 31st, 2024. The term of the current operating access agreement with Norfolk Southern Railway Company will expire June 30th, 2024. VRE and Norfolk Southern staff have been in discussion on terms for a new agreement, and both parties agree more time is needed. Those are the actions.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Bagley. Do any commissioners have questions or comments for VRE or on these items before we move to a block vote? Seeing none, then can I have a motion to approve B8B, C, and D, which is resolutions 2535, 2536, and 2537.
So moved.
Moved by Commissioner Bagley and seconded by Commissioner Stewart. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Now we will move on to item 9, the Transit Resource Center. We've got a couple of presentations left. We're about 5 minutes behind my sort of TikTok here. That doesn't mean that we don't want to hear everything, but just so that you have hope that we will get to the end of this in the next 20 to 33 minutes, depending. But first, we have senior program analyst Sophie let me see if I got the Spiliotopoulos.
Yeah.
My last name is DeFranchi, so I have to remember. Your presentation on Northern Virginia transit trends. This is a great work to show how transit has changed in our area over the past 10 years. Reminder, NVTC has a fantastic transit data dashboard, which we all have seen on our website that provides updates on ridership, access to jobs, transit services provided, and other data nuggets for each of our transit systems. There's a one pager at your chairs with highlights of the study. Over to you, sir.
Thank you. I will try to keep this snappy. So I am going to talk about the trends report that is going to be published later this month. And you do have this handout, so there's a lot more information on the handout and some different information on the handout than what I'm going to talk about, but we can go on to the next slide and begin. So just to cover what a transit trend report is, it's a high-level summary of transit over a period of time or an analysis of transit within a geographic area. And in this case, we actually looked at both. So it's just important to look back on what's been going on in the region, and that can help inform decisions going forward. So that's why we're looking at this. This specific report that we did looks at trends over time, like I said, for a 15-year period between 2008 and 2022. And we're noting the consistencies and developments in transit trends in the region. And then the second half of the report looks at trends from a geographic perspective. So you're using one sample year and looking at how people move in the region. On the next slide, I'm going to talk for one more second about why this is important, because it really, really is. As you may know, our region is a little bit complicated. Change is a constant factor here. And so it's imperative, like I said, to track what's going on in the region. It helps us better understand. It just helps us better our understanding, our ability to plan, and to help inform our decision-making throughout the region. So it's a 15-year look back, and in the last 15 years, we've increased bus service, we've added VRE and Metro rail stations, and the entire population in Northern Virginia has also grown by 20%. So a lot has been happening. So on the next slide, in the next section, I'm going to talk a little bit about just some of the performance metrics we looked at over time. There are a lot more in the report itself, but I'm just going to highlight two today so we can go on to the first, which is ridership. So depending on the trend, we found that Northern Virginia transit trends actually exceed the national trends. So in two cases, I want to note the first thing is that for most of the time period that we looked at, especially the 2000s, Northern Virginia commuter rail, which is VRE, has performed better than the national average of commuter rail ridership for the whole US. So on that graph, I know it's a little bit small, but the solid purple line is Northern Virginia commuter rail or VRE, and the dotted line is the national trend. So you can see that's actually much higher, which is great to see for most of that time period. And then looking at bus, which is the blue, same thing, solid blue is Northern Virginia, dotted is, the national average. So national bus ridership has been decreasing over time. This is something we've known for a long time. National bus ridership everywhere, it's been decreasing. But in the Northern Virginia region, it is decreasing at a lower rate. And my favorite thing is that it has bounced back faster than the national average, which I just think is a really key point after the pandemic specifically. And so let's talk about commuting for a second on the next slide. Mr. Carantonis actually asked about this earlier. This is ACS, American Community Survey commute data. So this is at the regional level, but you can get it at more census tract levels too, so we can look at that. Anyway, so we wanted to look at how commuting changed over time, because this just gives us an insight into peak transit demands. So the first thing you notice is this very distinct pre and post-pandemic dip. We see it everywhere kind of now. So before the pandemic, commutes by transit were between 10 to 11%. It kind of fluctuated a little bit between the years. We have no data for 2020. They just did not collect ACS census data that year. But in 2021 and 2022, we see a little bit of an uptick. And this is something that we're going to keep an eye on. When the 2023 data comes out, we will keep tracking it and just continue looking at this. And just on the left, you see this other graph that's comparing to the national trend of public transit commutes, or the share of public transit commutes. And as you can see, Northern Virginia residents commute more than the national average and bounce back faster after the pandemic than the national average. And that big decline there is, I mean, it's a pandemic, but I think that it's a strong decline as well because of our large federal workforce and the sending home and then the eventually coming back. And so let's talk about trends over space, so we can go to the next slide. So like I said, we use one sample year and we're thinking about the region as a whole and how people move within it. So we can go one more slide up. So this is just a snapshot of the region in time. So it's just looking at one sample weekday of travel. And we're looking at how and why movement is happening in the region. So what we found is that public transit is used more for getting to DC and Maryland, and then cars are used more for traveling within Northern Virginia, and within Virginia as a whole. So we found also that public transit and commuting are strongly linked, and public transit actually has the largest share of commuting. So you can see in this graph, the leftmost column has the biggest chunk, the biggest share of not dark green, which would be public transit, except for the gray that's little on the top. And that's basically this point that public transit has the largest share of commuting trips. And then further, of all trips, if you're thinking about all the trips and all the movement in one day, starting or ending in Northern Virginia, only 19% of those are commutes, which means that more than 80% of the trips to and from Northern Virginia aren't actually related to commuting. They could be for meals, there's social things, recreational things, shopping, anything like that. And that's just a point to say that there's a lot more happening outside of the commute. And this is one of our takeaways. You can see it on the front page of the handout that we should be looking beyond the commute when we're talking about transit as well. So I'm gonna wrap it up on the next slide with just a note about what's happening today in transit. So I said that this study ended in 2022. That is 2 years ago, a year and a half maybe. But that's because of data availability. There's a lag in the kind of data that we can get, especially this quantity of data and this breadth of data. So we do have some more recent data that I just wanted to highlight because we can't see it all for 2023 and 2024, but we can have a little taster. So when we're comparing ridership, this is specifically looking at all transit ridership in Northern Virginia. When we're comparing December 2020 ridership, which was very deep in the pandemic, to December 2023 transit ridership, there was an increase of 180%, which is a nearly tripling of the amount of riders, amount of monthly riders. So that is a nice step up and up and up each year. That year over year increase is very strong. And we saw this reflected in April when Mr. Clark came and he talked to us about Metro's recovery specifically. Both Metro Rail and Metro Bus have had also strong year over year increases. That's included in this number, but individually they've also done great. And just another highlight is that weekend bus and rail ridership are actually above pre-pandemic levels, and that's responses to more frequent service. And then more locally, Dash hit 4.5 million riders in FY 2023, which is the highest annual riders since their inception in the mid 80s. So things are looking up. And finally, Kate also, as her role at TISDAC, received an update from DRPT, which kind of reflected that's at the statewide level, that transit has been similarly increasing across the state year over year, and it's matching a similar trend. And so finally, I'll wrap it up with 3 big takeaways. You have them on the front of your handout as well. But the first of which is that transit is disproportionately used for commuting. I mentioned this earlier, but most trips in Northern Virginia are actually not work related. So we think that agencies should investigate options to better meet these non-commute travel and keep moving in that direction. The second point is that the region's buses have slowed down. This is not something I talked about in this presentation, but we do have the note on the handout that bus speeds have local bus speeds specifically have decreased over time. And that's something that we think that Northern Virginia should invest in opportunities for bus priority, and that can be dedicated bus lanes, queue jumps, TSP, which is transit signal priority. Vikram just talked about all of these things. We're just encouraging investment in that space. And finally, a lot of transit riders use routes that take them outside of Northern Virginia to DC or Maryland. And local agencies should just continue to prioritize options that can then help move people within the region as well, within Northern Virginia region, using transit. And so we're getting people out of their cars. And I just want to end on the point that on Tuesday, I attended a NVTA BRT working group meeting where they presented on some findings from a survey. And I was so happy to hear that they had a similar finding, and they said, quote, creating lines and networks that connect areas in Northern Virginia rather than feeding directly into DC should be a priority, which is really right on my point. Number 3, Alan was like, did they steal that from you? I was pretty happy about it. It's great to have validation of the findings. And it just points to the importance of transit that connects within our region. And so with that, I open it up for questions and we can keep moving.
Great, happy to have questions. Better to have alignment than trash talking between.
Oh, I totally agree.
So, and then over to Mr. Alpine.
Thank you. This is really beautiful, really nice. It'd be kind of neat to overlay this chart with what the non-transit, see what it's like. But my question is around tourism. Do we get tourists that use the buses?
That is a great question. I don't know if we need to have that data on hand, but I think that we could get that data, and I would be really interested to look at that. So I'm gonna write that down.
I just think, I mean, the dash increase, some folks are on King Street, right?
Yeah, Mr. Chair.
Yeah.
I would say in Alexandria, for sure, there's a lot of tourists that utilize not just the trolley on King Street, but because the other dash routes are fare free, they hop onto the 30 to 31. So we definitely get a lot of tourism traffic up and down King.
Not as much as Arlington, but sure. No, but it's a great question, and I don't know if there's follow-up that you think is appropriate that might work, but really appreciate the question, and Mr. Alcorn.
So yeah, as a follow-up matter, I think as well, and but point number 3 in Delegate Krizak's question, if we could get a couple of numbers, that'd be really helpful. So many transit riders use routes that take them out of Northern Virginia to DC and Maryland. What number is that? That would be great to get. And also the non-transit trips. How many trips overall are inside Northern Virginia versus go into DC or Maryland? That'd be great.
Definitely gonna get that data.
Thank you.
Commissioner Waukesha.
The 10% increase in commuter bus speeds, I assume, is related to the expansion of hot lanes over the same time period.
Yeah, I did find a correlation. I won't, because I'm a data person, I won't say one caused the other, but there's definitely a link between the two for sure.
So in your data, I mean, is this data that could be mapped, for example? So if you had a map of commuter bus routes, could you overlay the speeds with that map? And presumably you would find that those routes that have seen increased speeds are on hot lane routes? Or is that not how the data?
Unfortunately, I would love it to be that detailed, but it's not. We looked at it from just like the highest level of mode. So we don't have it route level, especially historically.
Yeah.
That would be, I wish we had it.
Got it. Well, I mean, that is pretty significant and positive. I mean, that is a big, major improvement in quality of life for a lot of people who run those commuter buses.
It very much is, if I could add something, some of the conversations I was just having with the commuter choice team a couple days ago was at the storytelling we're talking about is we've had some really good anecdotal stories from OmniRide and other folks about the fact that, look, ever since those lanes opened up, we can now run more trips in the morning because they can get in and out so fast, which basically allows them to provide more service for less money. That's why I think one of the stories we're going to focus on going forward. Now, that's not data like Sophie's looking for, but I think we can tie some of those together anecdotally, some work we've been doing with PRTC, with the commuter choice team, because it is a good news story of this is a very, very viable option on extremely congested roads. The Commonwealth, in partnership with the concessionaires, has put billions of dollars into those facilities, and transit is benefiting from that. So I think we can dig a little bit deeper into that and build on that story.
Yeah. Great, Commissioner Briskman, and then
Thank you.
Pelchak, and then Bagley, and then.
So takeaway number one, I resonates with me, and I find it very telling that most trips in Northern Virginia are not work related, even though transit has been disproportionately used for commuting. So that speaks to the idea that transit has not been designed to be used by anybody but commuters. And I have one point and one question. Can this data be disaggregated by gender, race, income, other demographics, to see what types of trips are not getting served? And I'm gonna sound like a broken record, but if you read the book Invisible Women, The Gender Data Gap in Designing just about everything we design in government, they have been designed for the, dominant person, and that in transportation, it's point A to point B. And caregivers and women don't travel their day point A to point B, and this number one takeaway shows that. They have to be in their cars. So can the data be disaggregated so we can see what kinds of trips there are?
It
And
can.
who's taking them?
It can be disaggregated. So this data is from the 2017 Regional Travel Survey, which is unfortunately the most recent, but it's done by COG and they are doing a new one. So I would be really interested to wait for the new fresh data to come and then look at that at a more specific level.
Do you think that data can be disaggregated?
Yes, it's the same survey. It's just
Same
being
survey,
updated.
okay. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Great. I think I said, I'll check and then Bagley, and we'll go to you, Reed.
Thank you, Rachel. This is always great work. Sophie, I want to take a few of these with you in the community. A couple questions. When on number 6, where you talk about where you have the Northern Virginia versus the rest of the country, is that every place or just urban regions like ours that have sort of urban suburban transit systems?
That is a really good question. I believe so. It's a national average. So, and I pulled specifically transit data, so it would include more rural transit as well. It's not specifically like apples to apples. Everyone exactly like.
Yeah, if it can be disaggregated more, I'd be interested in this.
Yeah.
Very helpful as we become more, right, we were less of that, even though we have transit, definitely, it was designed to go through that. In so many ways, if you see our lines are east-west versus having those north and south ones that often are run by the. And then I guess my other, definitely about the frequent service. My other question is, as we look at some of these trends and start to do all this work for BRT, we have so many lines that are not BRT, right? And so I guess, do we know if other systems are using some of those BRT light options, the queue jumping and others? And are we able to use some of this research to try to help other bus systems across the region be more efficient? Have we already started that? That's my question, or not yet?
We have started that a little bit. So last year, Xavier and I presented on our bus speed study, which looked at kind of looking at speeds to then advance bus priority. So we have been kind of integrating it in that way. And I think that we do kind of look to.
You don't know that any of our networks have really started to do that work?
I don't know off the top of my head, no.
I mean, that's to me so critical, right?
Absolutely.
80%. So for us, I mean, this is such useful information we can take with us to our transportation committee meetings, to discussions with staff to understand what are the barriers and are there ways we can invest more in that other than waiting for the long-term BRT projects. So
Great.
yeah,
We do take advantage of all the materials that get presented here. Almost all of them we actually present to our management advisory committee. So that's the jurisdictional staff. And I know that Sophie and Xavier actually have a team of data folks for the region that do a lot of the QA. So we do a lot of sharing and input and feedback to the jurisdictions about what we're finding. And so that is getting out there, but having that amplified from priorities, obviously, each of the boards is going to be helpful. So we're like a constant resource.
Right.
And pointing information to the jurisdictional staff. We'll continue to do that.
And then on the good news, and hopefully they've reached out to you, my meeting with VDOT, I fought for getting us that bus. I think in the fall is supposed to be launched, hopefully if all goes well, between Titans and Bethesda on those fast lanes. And to provide some new connections. It'd be great to start to get base data that gets launched and how we really launch that together. I know they're gonna reach out and our staff to get your enforcement. Thank you.
Great, Commissioner Magley?
I have a couple of quick questions that you don't really give answers for, I guess, because I want to keep it quick.
I love that. Rewatch and get back.
Yeah, one is just like a thought bubble type question of how does this information become a part of like SJ 28 and DMV moves? Like, I realize that's about funding, but like the why and the like why this matters and how funding should be, calculated should be informed by the trends you're identifying. So can I just like drop that? Okay, noted. And then the other category, the gray other category, I'm just curious, what is that? What is other? And I'm sorry if I missed it.
Which one are you?
The pie that is mostly green.
Okay.
Well, there are some people who are right there bikes.
It's a lot of different things. I knew someone was gonna ask about it.
Okay, sorry, that was me.
No, I mean, it's.
We're talking about bikes over here and how you take kids on them or.
Yeah.
It is biking, it's like taxis, it's walking, it's any other kind of mode.
Okay, because what I was curious about there, just to scratch at is, even on VRE, we've seen a significant uptake of people bringing their bikes onto VRE. And so that's a multimodal. Is that a transit use? Is that an other use? I take my bike on Metro all the time. I put it on Metro bus. So I'm curious, to the same point about gender, can we further sort of break down other, just so that we can see growth and changes in some of those newer modes or multimodal choices that are being made? Because we're all making these investments into like bike lanes and things like that, like I sense we'd see some growth. And my last comment was, since the takeaway for me here is like, it's not all about commuting, the hours approach, like we talked about somebody, and I don't fault them for it. Somebody said earlier, like, well, business hours, but obviously like 8 to 8 isn't the focus necessarily that this is telling me. So when we're designing our routes, when we're thinking about frequency, we like default still to focusing on commuter timing, but maybe it's about dinner time and people taking the bus out to eat, or the server who wants to get home at 11:30 p.m. So that's technically still a commute, I guess. But to the extent that this can inform our thinking about when frequency matters, I would love it to do so.
Maybe wise for you to watch the video a couple of times to figure out everything you need to follow up on, but.
So don't read. All right, so I think on the same slide, on slide 6. So this has data that runs from 2019, 2022, 2021, 2022, and we know that the pandemic was in there in 2021. Do we have any early data on what the telecommunication or telecommuting population is for 23 or 24?
We don't yet. That census data is on its way, but it is pretty lagged.
Because what I'm looking at here is that it appears, and I think that probably goes to the study part as well, is that we're looking at a new normal, because if you take out 2021, you go from 7% people telecommuting to 28%, which is a 400% increase. And I don't know that we've seen anything that has said that that's going to change or go down, and probably going to go up. If you look at transit, it looks like transit went from 10% down to 4%. Which, if I'm doing my math right, is that a 60% loss? I mean, that's what we're all seeing as we're talking about that. And then you see that the use of cars went from 78 down to 64%, and that might be an 18% decrease. But does that mean that there are fewer cars on the road? And do we need to adjust our planning for this new normal? So I got a lot of questions, but I don't expect you to answer them now, so.
Yeah, I don't have answers off the top of my head for all of those, but I will note that 2022, the telework and the commuting, that will change for the 2023. I expect that to change.
You think there'll be more telecommuting?
I think that there will, I don't know about a big statement on that. I do think transit has increased since 2022.
Okay. But again, I think.
And this is just commuting.
And I was saying to Senator Salim, it's like, I think that what this has done, we've all talked about this, but this has, we were moving towards a trend of more telecommuting, but because of the pandemic, it probably accelerated it by 15 or 20 years. And so we've not had an opportunity to have our transit systems adjust. And therefore we have to figure out a way to adjust because now we've been brought 15 to 20 years into the future.
Great, we've had a lot of good discussion and curiosity continues past 9 o'clock for this commission. So that's, and I do think there'll be follow-up, and I imagine that Sophie, you and Kate will sort of think about the right ways to follow up in addition to this. I'm also mindful that Ann has a presentation that is coming next on a couple other items. And so we'll wrap it there. Thank you so much for the presentation and all the great questions, colleagues. Now we'll go to Senior Program Manager Ann McGrain. This is Transit Technology, item 10, to give a quick update on Northern Virginia's Zero Strategic Plan. If you recall, NVTC launched our regional zero emission bus strategic plan earlier this year. There have been a lot of activities since this effort was launched. So Ann, you ready to bring us up to speed? I will sort of, this is when we're going to present, mindful of time. And so I want to give you the full space, but also want to sort of throw it out to Kate. If there's a way that, you know, this needs, if we have a fulsome discussion, it needs to come back. We should be ready to audible, but not take away from your space, Ann. So over to you.
Good evening. I promise this will be brief, and if there are further questions, we anticipate a much more in-depth conversation at a future PAC meeting. So as was mentioned, I'm providing an update on our zero emission bus strategic plan, which was released in January of this year. Next slide, please. But realizing that there are several new faces in the audience, I thought I just should give a bit of an overview on the transit technology program. It really has two main focus areas. One is fare collection and policy, and the second element is zero emission buses, which is what tonight's conversation will be on. And then more generally, the program really looks to coordinate among all our local agencies on any technologies of interest that we think will improve transit, whether it's for the agencies themselves and their operations or for the riders. And probably over the past 2 years now, MVTC has really taken a role in guiding that regional conversation about zero emission buses. And we do this by hosting a working group with Northern Virginia staff and also regional jurisdictional staff that discusses implementation challenges of zero emission buses. We also participate in a variety of other zero emission bus committees at both kind of statewide and national level that then we can bring back and share in that working group that we host. And really, given the costs that everyone is seeing around zero emission bus infrastructure, one thing we like to pay a lot of close attention to are grant opportunities and also the potential for shared infrastructure opportunities among the agencies. So you'll see kind of these points are carried through into strategies of our strategic plan. Next slide. Before I get into kind of some details on the plan itself, I just wanted to briefly discuss us in light of kind of the rest of the country. So what I have on this slide is information from the most recent Zeroing In on ZEBs report, which is released by an organization called CalSTART. And they do annual reports actually of a lot of different modes of zero emission vehicles, but one of them is buses. And so it tracks progress with funding, ordering, deploying, delivering zero emission buses. And they kind of do it in bulk like that just because there is sometimes quite a long lag between when you decide to order a bus and when it's actually in service, but they want to track the improvement that's happening. Because I think what we find sometimes is we want to understand how our region is doing compared to the rest of the country. And really, when you look at some of the stats, we're somewhat in line with what's happening across the nation. Obviously, you can see from the map that California is a bit of an outlier, but California also was a really early adopter for zero emission vehicles. And in some ways is a really great example of what happens when you have robust and dedicated funding and incentives to help grow those fleets. But if you consider that the median number of zero emission buses currently funded, ordered, delivered, or deployed in agencies nationwide is 8 buses, you know, both Fairfax Connector and Dash surpass that number. They have 12 and 14 zero emission buses in service and more on the way. You know, Loudoun and Arlington have orders in for battery electric buses. So there is progress being made. I think again, with that 8 number, kind of what you start to see is this thing that I think a lot of different agencies are confronting right now, which is you can buy a handful of buses kind of with the existing capacity that is at your facilities. And then when you really want to start moving the entire fleet, you have to do kind of larger facility upgrades and that just takes more time. But anyway, I just wanted to give this kind of level setting of our area. So next slide. For those of you who were here in January, you'll remember the 6 strategies of our strategic plan. And I just want to point out that in the KIP memo, I provide more detailed updates on kind of really focusing on strategies 1, 3, and 4, because that's where we've made a lot of progress in, I guess, the past 6 months. Tonight, I'm really just focusing on the funding coordination and the shared charging infrastructure pieces, so 3 and 4. Next slide. So just want to reiterate that we have had a number of big wins in the past year. The agencies in Northern Virginia have been going after federal funding and winning it. So just to remind everyone, WMATA, Dash, and Loudon all won low, no emission grants from the Federal Transit Administration in what is a very competitive discretionary grant process. And WMATA's win was the largest offered that round. They got $104 million, and that went to work on the electrification of the Cinderbed Road facility, which will also benefit Fairfax County as it's a shared facility that will support a future Fairfax connector fleet. And then, of course, recently, this body, signed a letter of endorsement for Fairfax's recent application for a low-no grant. So we'll find out whether that's successful later this year. But really, again, the take-home point is really the agencies are going after federal grants, and we're trying to support them as they're doing that. The other 2 federal elements I'll mention is just that Alexandria recently won a federal earmark for on-route charging. And then, of course, NVTC, we've received a free technical assistance from the Joint Office of Energy and Transportation for our feasibility study on shared on-route charging. And kind of the final update for this funding piece is just that this summer, we're really continuing to advance this work, and we're doing it with our newest transit fellow, Will, who we're working to identify kind of less traditional grant opportunities, but ones that transit agencies are still eligible for. So considering just how oversubscribed the low-no grant is, and really a lot of federal transit grants, trying to look beyond the FTA and sometimes even beyond DOT at the EPA, Department of Energy. There are a lot of different areas of the federal grant process that can provide funds for zero emission vehicles. Next slide, please. And then the second effort to touch on is just our shared on-route feasibility study. So this was something we launched in March. And again, it's this free technical assistance that we requested from the joint office, which was created as part of the IIJA. And so what we're looking at is we're trying to identify locations where multiple bus agencies have overlapping stops that then are also locations where a battery electric bus might need to recharge during its day's routes. And so then assuming we identify locations, it's looking at operational and logistical considerations for managing the charging. So the way to kind of think about the whole study is you can think about it as first we're identifying the opportunity, like where do the paths cross? And that's what this map is showing. This is just bus stops and routes of 4 of the agencies and kind of identifying where the big spots are. So the basically the darker the circle, the more buses per hour in the peak period, and the bigger the circle, the more bus stops at that location. You can see that, the darkest and biggest is the Pentagon, which I think makes sense to everyone in this room. But so that opportunity aspect is the first point, but then you also have the need, like, do buses actually need to charge at that point? And then you can get onto the feasibility of, is there sufficient power at that location? Who owns the right of way? How do you deal with, ongoing maintenance and capital expenses across multiple agencies? So this is something that the consultant team is working on. And I'll note that we're really, for this study itself, it's focusing on Metrobus, ART, Dash, and Fairfax Connector, simply because they're the ones right now that kind of have some of the battery electric buses online and also in the areas where like jurisdictionally a shared on-route charger might land. I just want to point that out to say that doesn't mean that the other agencies won't be able to use a potential shared on-route charger in the future. It's more just kind of limiting the scope a little bit to understand that problem and then kind of moving from there. We're continuing to work with local staff on this work. It's a big data effort. And we'll have kind of a draft report later in the year. So next slide, that was a really quick summary of where we are. And I'm just gonna now do a shameless plug for the fact that next week at the Transit Innovation Summit, we are having an entire panel on zero emission buses and the challenges our agencies are confronting. So if you do have more questions or want to learn more, we'll have an entire hour devoted to this topic. And we have great staff from Metro Dash and Fairfax Connector there to talk about it with us. And with that, I will look at questions.
Yeah, maybe if you have burning questions, you can bring them maybe you can follow up with me sort of. Yeah, an email, but I know from our past conversations, there's been a lot of interest in this topic. And so you have the Transit Summit. You don't see hands shooting up and I'm not trying to be too heavy, but I do think maybe that's the venue, and also emailing Kate and Ann as well. But we, Arlington County, we had an hour of discussion on electric buses and today. So that's not to delay us. We will continue to be interested in this topic for sure. Thank you for the presentation and the work. Really appreciate it. We don't have anyone from DRPT with us today as we await news of Director Yabul's successor. I figure there's like a drum roll somewhere there. They have provided a written report in your materials. And now over to Kate. What do you have to share with us as part of your executive director report?
Especially for our new folks, we do have a wonderful highlight of materials that are going on. There are very small things I wanted to highlight. I do want to celebrate and recognize staff who were involved, particularly with our Ride With Us marketing campaign, our regional marketing campaign. That won both a marketing award in the state of Virginia as well as nationally. And so kudos to our team who were involved in that. We also had a number of staff, and you saw many of them today, really shined, I guess, shone at the VTA conference. We basically filled the room with our presentation on the value of transit, as well as some really great work on visualizing transit data. And Sophie and Xavier in particular. And so I just want to highlight that. I've also had a chance to meet at a couple different places. It's great to be able to share the work that we've got going on here. A lot of folks outside of Northern Virginia are really excited about the work that's going on here at NVTC. You've heard about the Innovation Summit. If you're interested in going next Friday, it's over at George Mason University. Just let Rhonda or I know. We will get all of you in there. We'll probably already have it name tag for you, but if you let us know, we'll make sure you have a lunch. So that's important. We'd love to have you there. It is pretty much all day 9 to 2 next Friday, and we'd love to see you there. Also, invitations will be going out for our 60th anniversary celebration and documentary premiere, which will be on Thursday, September 5th. I believe you might have a little handout available at your desk as well. We have a brand new transit fellow that actually Ann had mentioned, Will Hetzel, if you want to wave. So this is, again, we love to have our fellowship program. He's helping on the zero emission bus efforts. He is at Virginia Tech. We seem to get a lot of Virginia Tech folks here. Same, happens to be. Of course, greatly appreciate DRPT for funding this program. Now, while we have a fellow coming in, we do have a fellow that's going to be leaving us. And so Robert, back there, Robert Rosil, he's been working on with our communications team, a lot of our social media, a lot of the help with our 60th anniversary. Robert's been really instrumental, and we are really excited to hear about your next steps and all the things that you have going on there. We do have a number of meetings that are going to be scheduled moving forward. The next scheduled meeting is our joint WMATA and Legislative Policy Committee meetings on July 11th at 4:30. And it's important to note, we are not having a meeting on the 4th of July. Okay, so you can go and shoot your fireworks and march in your parades and all that good stuff Our next commission meeting is Thursday, July 18th, and it is a 100% virtual meeting. Strongly recommend we incorporated all of the General Assembly, the new rules associated with virtual meetings in your material. We really want folks to take a look at that. In particular, focusing on cameras on. There's some dynamics. We're going to provide some further guidance before the 18th meeting, but I just want to let you know that there are requirements regarding having audio visual on and those sorts of things. Again, you're going to get that all fleshed out to get the right information out there. We do have a little bit more flexibility how many meetings we can have virtually. And so there's a lot of things we have some more flexibility. But as a reminder, when we do regular meetings and you would like to participate virtually, you need to let the chair either of that committee or of the meeting, as well as Rhonda, know the reason that you would like to be participating virtually and the location where you're going to be participating. And that's something that we actually need to get at least 8 hours in advance, and that's per code. So folks are usually pretty good about it, but it's very important that we get that out there. So, and the last thing I want to say are financial reports. As always, and Scott is here, they are available in your meeting material, and that is the end of my comments.
Great, Vice Chair Snyder, you had a question?
Just one quick request. I'm feeling a certain urgency about federal funding and the need to make sure that we're accessing that. And I know you've done a huge amount of work and advice, but I'm wondering if we could sort of ratchet that up, because there may be some changes in Washington that would make some of these funding sources not available. So the point that I'm making is maybe we ought to just, I know you put a lot of priority, but even more on what federal funds are available for everything from zero vehicles, emission vehicles to the 7 project.
Absolutely.
Great, thank you. I don't see or hear any other business. So we will thank Commissioner Snyder for reminding me this evening that it is the 80th anniversary of D-Day. Thank all of you for engaging so well and so relatively later. I'll try to keep being efficient with the meetings. I will go directly with my daughter and I will